How's that, Ross?
It was a great intro.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
So let me just I'm going to click this button to go live on Instagram as well. So this is episode 5 of LivLive, and really crazy excited to welcome Ross Barney. We were just chatting in the green room before. We worked together like 20 years ago, which is a little bit crazy to imagine, but it's kind of one of those special things where we've just always kept in touch. And as we started doing LivLive, actually, I think that you were the impetus for it, because we would just, especially during COVID and stuff, everyone hop on these video calls and we were just talking like, dude, we should just go live with this. This is so good. People definitely want to hear what we're talking about. And so Ross has started Tumu Studio with his wife, Haley, and Ross, just awesome to have you here, man.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate the invite. You know, you're right about those COVID sessions were really quite helpful, actually. You know, getting together and sharing information across the distance was pretty good at that time.
Yeah, it was. We just started connecting with people that we hadn't talked to in a while, right? It was kind of cool, and the whole video conference thing really started up. And I think we did some marketing stuff, and then just talked about business. So when did you guys start Tumu? Like 10 years ago?
I want to say it was eight years now. 8 years ago, 2007. So yeah.
In Chicago and Boulder, right?
Yeah.
And are you?
Yeah, we do most of our work now is in Boulder. Mostly because, as you probably know, when you run a smaller company, expanding into several markets takes a lot of work. And so we kind of made the conscious decision to kind of focus down on where we are now. But we still do work in Chicago. We have we just finished up a restaurant on the Riverwalk, which was our last project. We don't have anything active there, but we're looking at a couple things.
Awesome. And I'm assuming your first project with Tumu was in Chicago, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And what was that? So how did Tumu start? Did it start with a project or did it start with an idea?
It started with the need to do something different. So my career has spun quite the distance now. You know, we started doing international high-rise work, right? And my mother's an architect. And so I practiced with her for, the better part of a decade, and my wife as well. So we were doing large civic work, right? Like the Riverwalk, things like that. And public work is super rewarding, right? Like you touch a lot of people, maybe a little bit, if you will. Like there's some people you can maybe get, they feel your space more inspirationally. But the way they set up large projects is the OAC, right? Architect, owner, client, and the contractor are always kind of kept separate, you know? And so you have to make documents, your documents go out to bid, and then, you know, yada, yada. And I always thought that process could use a little bit more love. You know, it seems to lead to people kind of standing in their own court and fighting for themselves when like really we should be fighting for the project. And so when Haley and I were looking at it, we were saying, well, you know, maybe we should go and try something different. And we started with like smaller commercial and retail space, a little bit of residential. But at that scale, like the owner doesn't want to hear any complaints because like no one's suing anyone, because if you sue someone, it's going to cost you more than you're spending to build your house to get like started, right?
Right.
And so they just want solutions, and then you have to work right with your team and with your contractor and with the owner. And so the relationship is a lot different. So we were looking to experience something like that, you know, where we could focus instead of on, you know, the inch, like the 16th of an inch, you know, in design. And so that's kind of where we were. And that's why we started 8 years ago now.
That's awesome, man. And yeah, I mean, just to kind of go through your resume, which, I mean, you're right. You were at RB or Ross Barney Architects for, did you say 10 years?
Yeah, close to 10 years.
And then Getch. Was Getch right after that?
Getch was before. So I graduated from Pratt, and then made my way back to Chicago from New York. Spent 4 years at Getch, maybe 4.5. So I left in 2008. Spent a very brief stint at a company called 4240, actually, which is coincidentally out of Denver. and they're still around here. They had a Chicago office, but then 2008 hit, and it was like I was just at the top. I was like the newest hire, and so they let go. I don't know, half their staff. Like it was just everything was gone. Right.
Those are good times, right?
Yeah. Good times. Good times.
All
And
right.
then my mother's firm, Ross Barney Architects. She actually, the public sector kind of picked up a little bit. It was still not great, but they picked up a little bit. And so they needed help and were hiring. And so I figured, why not kind of put that part of my career into motion. And so then spent a good portion of time with practicing with my mother.
No, and that's and then all the while teaching, right? So then you're teaching, you're a studio professor at IIT.
Yeah, I started teaching at IIT, and God, when I guess back then I was young, 2007. I actually co-taught a studio with Carol, and so my initial, because I have a 5-year degree, which is the peon of degrees in architecture, at least in educational. Like these days, like you can't do anything without a master's, and if you want, if you really want it, you probably go a doctor, which does. I don't know. In architecture, doesn't make sense. I think it can. But because I had this 5-year degree, I always thought teaching was great, but getting into it, it would have been difficult with a 5-year degree, because even as old as I am, in 2007, when I started teaching, having a master's was pretty, is getting very, very standard. And so anyway, Donna Roberts, who was the dean of the college, called my mother and was like, are you interested in doing a studio? And she didn't have all the time. And so we decided to co-teach together. And I started doing that, and then took on my own studios probably 3 years later, and have been teaching since.
Awesome. Now, looking back to 2007, the things that you were teaching, do you agree with still? Or do you have no idea what you're talking about back then?
Agree with. The way I was teaching is way different. It goes back to actually our green room conversation, is that, and in fact, the school is way different too. Right now I teach at the University of Colorado, Boulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not quite as hardcore a school as IIT, to put it, lightly. And I think when I was younger, I taught like I had been taught, which is like, I remember my freshman studio, after spending the 120 hours a week, like working on our project, that like you'd go into reviews at Pratt, and like, if you didn't really put in the work, you were done. Like I remember, grown men, 20-year-olds, like crying in the studio, like our freshman studio, I think, at least the third did not make it to sophomore year. It just was how it was. And so when I started at IIT, I think I was more of that cut, where I was like, okay, you got to put in the work. Let's do this work, and I'm pretty passionate. So I probably came off as kind of a jerk sometimes, but it's more because
I do not believe that.
It takes so much effort. You know what I'm saying? And the reward, we can talk about that later, but I think it's really rewarding. But like, I don't make as much as like my clients, right? So even if you're working in the public realm and stuff like that on larger projects, I think it's really a passion project, right? And so I think the way I approached it when I was younger was different.
Yeah, I at Virginia Tech 5-year program, it was pretty old school too, right? So we had the professors from the 50s and 60s. So it was the pinups were terrifying. There wasn't a right answer, right? And you're there, you're modeling or building whatever it is to the wee hours of the night, trying to anticipate what your professor is going to critique about it, which is an exercise in futility,
right?
Because they're gonna find, like, the whole point of the critique is it's not perfection. They're trying to find other angles of you to think of that you're supposed to think about, right? So it's not like, I just would always think of a Christmas Story, right? When he turns in his essay and the teacher says, "This is the greatest essay ever, A plus 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 plus." Like, that doesn't happen in architecture school. It kind of doesn't happen in the real world, right? So, but as a painful exercise for 5 years of just, continually cycling, trying to get to the best solution, and exploring, I thought it was a really valuable thing, which I think can circle back to the kind of the information age discussion that we had earlier. We're in the green room, but I just want to add to that. So my little story is 4th year of architecture. I come back from Europe. I was kind of in a daze. I studied in Switzerland the first semester. I came back and had this young Danish professor who was super excited. He had us building like this giant kayak in the lobby, and we're supposed to design this boathouse. I did not care about it. Like, my mind was just not into it, right? So I remember presenting the project, and he didn't know me. He just knew the work that I presented, and he goes, David, I don't know if you just come from a long line of architects, like maybe your father and your grandfather's an architect, but I don't know why you should be an architect. This is terrible. What is this space? Is this a place where cats go to die? I was like, I don't know. So, but what was cool about that experience is I didn't cry. I knew that it wasn't good. Like, I didn't really believe in it. I was just out of it. And I had been building a lot of furniture in the wood and metal shop. So I went to him afterwards. And this is where you kind of learn to be a grown-up too, right? You don't go and complain to the principal or the board of directors that you had a mean teacher. I said, I've been out of it. I was studying in Europe. It was an incredible experience. It's just weird coming back. I've been building a lot of furniture. And he's like, perfect. I want you to get all your furniture, bring it into studio, and I'm going to critique that. I'm like, that is freaking cool. So there's some really powerful learning moments that happen in that environment. And I don't have the slightest idea what architecture school looks like today, to be honest. So you're saying it is pretty different?
Yeah. I think the culture shift from IIT to University of Colorado was different. I teach at EMVD, so it's not like an accredited program. It's really interesting though. It goes back to like something that IIT actually was in the beginning when I was teaching there in 2007. It was kind of interdisciplinary, which was interesting. We had some landscape students that were just incredible, and the EMVD program is planning and product, landscape, and architecture. And so it kind of goes back to that roots, but it's a little less rigorous on the architecture part, just because it can't be. You don't have the time, right? It's a 4-year undergrad degree. And so you don't have the 5 years, and then you only have like a serious architecture studio, 3 studios, which are full semester studios. But I think it's really different. The way we teach, I don't think people are receptive these days to the pick yourself up by the bootstraps thing, which I don't know if I agree with it so much looking back either. Is it okay to be working 80 hours a week at your job? Like, I remember back in our first job, like there were competitions to see who put the most hours in. I think
sleeping in the model shop.
I think my wife won once, and it was like, ungodly amounts of hours that we put in, right? And so was that the right way? I'm not so sure. But the way I at least approach teaching nowadays is more, it's more inclusive. I'm trying to be give the students ways to express themselves through architecture more than me kind of beating rigor into them. Does that make sense? Like,
this is the way, right?
Like, I mean, for example, if I can send an EMVD student, and in Colorado, we're one of the last states where you can still do a journey person way of architecture, so you don't need to be licensed or have a accredited degree to become licensed. And so some of the students that I have will go out into the workforce. Well, how do you arm someone that has a 4-year degree against, a master's degree, like they're coming from GSD, like, what do you do? And so I think now I focus more on getting them passionate about the work, like thinking about who would be a person I would want on my team, right? It's someone that's dedicated, they're self-driven, right? They know what I don't know. Like, we're teaching a lot of AI, or at least I'm trying to teach as much AI as we can get in, because I think practitioners like us, if we're not spending time trying to get it done, or not working in Zaha Hadid's office where you're making your own, that there's a big gap in between. And I think, like, if a student comes into your office knowing AI, that's a huge asset. And so instead of trying to beat this like design rigor into them, I'm trying to do that and we have fun. But then you learn kind of the essentials of what you would need to move forward through your career.
I think that's fantastic. And I do, yeah, I'm kind of there with you. Like, I don't know that I necessarily fully agree that, the way our studio culture and probably early career culture, if that's really the best way. But I do feel like it was a really valuable thing for pushing young people out of their comfort zone to probably dig deeper and realize things that they didn't know were there if they were just kind of navigating it their own way.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you know what it is actually is I've been spending some time thinking it's about time. Like architects, I mean, there's a handful of us that we'll say get lucky, but that's all kind of a farce anyway, that are able to get practice on when they're very young. But we call it practice because we need the time to understand all the components that go into what we do. Like it takes time, right? Like a lot of time. 10,000 hours in architecture is like an internship, and so I think that was part, like, I don't know how to feed that back into there because the knowledge you need and the time you need to kind of understand, I think the profession and people actually is something that we need to reclaim somehow. We did it because we spent ungodly hours in the office and in the studio, right? I wonder how to facilitate that knowledge. Maybe it's about more efficiency, but the time.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of the time too, it's something that I don't think. If you look at certain sports, there's certain things where you practice something one day and then the next day you've got it, right? I feel like the practice that goes into architecture and the learning and the education and the doing of it really takes years to really feel that and be like, oh, wow, that's where I got that, right? And it's hard to really make those connections. And I remember Gene Egger, who was studying with us, professor in Europe, kind of told us that. He's like, you guys are going to get back from here and it's just going to be like, this didn't do anything for you. Like it did something for you, but you're not really going to know what you got from this experience for years, right? I feel like the culture and the intensity and the time that's put in and the in that studio environment is just that. And we didn't even really have computers. I mean, we did, but it was really just for Photoshop. And I graduated 03. I think we're about the same, right? So 98 to 03. And it was chipboard models and, hot glue was banned. There was some very specific criteria of study.
That's just me, man. The hot glue thing. You take the hot glue and then you take the keyboard thing, you turn it upside down and it freezes in place. It was like a lifesaver, man. Like that was like the knowledge of that. It's funny what you figure out going on. Because I kind of grew up under a drafting table, right? And so like I remember going into Pratt and we had to do these drawings, like you're talking about hand drawings. I remember we did these drawings that were 3 feet wide by like 15 feet long. Okay. Like these exploded axonometrics. And I had a buddy in studio who was there when I left. I left at like 1 a.m. and I came back at like 5 or something, took a nap. Right. And he was doing a hatch and he was doing it by hand where he was taking his pear line and moving it up an 1/8 inch and moving it up an 1/8 inch. Right. Like every line by line. And I said, what are you doing, man? And I took a letterer. Do you remember the letterer with a little like circle on it? And you could make And I took the letterer and I put it on the pear line and I went, he was like,
oh my God.
It's the little things you learn,
Yeah. No, I used to try and draw with I can't even remember the weights of lead, right? Whatever the hardest one was. Draw as many lines on a giant hatch as close as you possibly could. And my first year professor would be like, great job. That's what you should do.
You spent a lot of time. That's good.
But I want to tie that in because, I think we're both pretty used to very rigorous, structured architecture programs, right, with a level of freedom, but the structure and the organization of the design, and then going and working in Chicago architecture, which is very, very formal, right? I mean, you have the Mies van der Rohe goes into Getch, you have the Helmut Jans, like it's very, 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 very formal. I feel like, and maybe it's part, obviously, you know, because you were at RB, and you know Carol is your mom as well, and so you're used to that. I feel like there's certain firms in Chicago, and Tumu is certainly one of them, that has that just high level of precision and detail and craft and elegance, but also playfulness. It's really, really cool, right? Do you feel that? Like,
yeah, you know, I always thought it's funny, you know, hopefully Jim Getch is watching this, you know, but so like one thing I always struck me about like the Miesian modern, right? And it was weird. It hit me in Getch because I remember going to his apartment, and he like lived by the law, you know, his apartment was super modern, like a lot of white, you know, and I thought, like, I remember standing there once and saying, man, if I put a coffee cup on this table, the whole thing's ruined. You know what I'm saying? Like, as soon as the kids are in your space and it's all tornado, like the whole thing's over. You know what I'm saying? And actually, even teaching at IIT, I think what's lovely about that space, and I think I probably struck people the wrong way, is because they used to line the tables up in these rows, you know, along Crown Hall. They were like, you know, row. And when we got into studio, we would be like, okay, let's get rid of the row, you know, let's break it in the middle, because the long row sucks for crits. It sucks for interaction, right? Like you have to go from one side and walk a quarter mile to the next side of the row to get even across the aisle from someone, right? And so we would break apart the desks and stuff like that. And so I always thought that the imperfection, right? The play was what like that rigor modernist was missing, you know, the play in it. I mean, you see it in a lot of like, and for example, like Dan Wheeler's work, right? Like he's just exceptional. And like, I think he's able to find like these very clean lines and reduce things down to their kind of essence, but at the same time, there's still surprise, right? I think it's actually humanity that Dan bakes into his work. And that's what, you know, we went like by the machine, and then we gain our humanity back. And it's, you know, feeling warm in a house and understanding, you know, that not all space wants to feel like an airport terminal, you know, like you're lost in it. And that's, I think that's where the balance is, right?
So in the work of Tumu in nearly the last decade, so what is your favorite, I still call it playful, but that moment, that unexpected moment in your work that you guys have done?
You know, I think we've been fortunate enough to have clients that are adventurous and trust us, so we can do things that are a little bit unexpected. One example is we worked with a client. Her name's Dana Cree. She owns a small ice cream store, which is just awesome. They're called Pretty Cool, which is an aside. We had project folders called Pretty Cool. We had pretty cool meetings, which was great, you know. But she was willing to like entertain, like an ice cream shop. Usually you walk into it and you have seats and you have a counter, right? And we thought, you know, she wanted to find something more Instagrammable. She wanted something a little different. And so we took an analysis of her space, which wasn't very large, in Logan Square. And we figured out actually that if we put like a tiered seating, like what happens in like a lecture hall or even the Riverwalk, you know, where you can seat, and is it a step, is it a seat, no one really knows, that you could actually fit more people in the space than putting them all at little cafe tables, like, you know, your French cafe table with 2 people. And so we were able to kind of study that, and that store to this day, and the one in Lincoln Park, have this like really nice curved seating that people interact with, right? They go in, the kids jump up and down, and it's really fun. And I think those kind of moments have always been things that we're looking for, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely one that pops in my head. There's another one. And is it in a house where there's like a barrel? Like a
Oh, that was it. That's really interesting. So this is where like the breadth of our careers come in. That client wanted something fun. It was like this little nook under a stair, and they wanted something fun. And they were like, originally the mother was like, I want to study, have a place for us to study and relax. And so I drew this thing that I thought was too crazy. It was like this weird, like kind of bench that went around and like it kind of, yeah, it was curvilinear and funky. And we went into this meeting and I showed the client and they were like, can you be more adventurous? And the answer is yes. When anyone asks me that, if there's anyone listening, the answer is always yes. Like we can do that, right? And so we had this idea that Aaron Areno, do you know who that is? Have you ever watched Mork and Mindy? I mean, to really date ourselves. There was this chair designed in the mid-century that was a ball. Okay. And there's this thing that when you sit in it, it was like almost sensory deprivation, right? You felt like you were alone when you leaned back into it. And so we conceptualized these two balls in like kind of hanging in space under this stair that the kids would be able to go in and like just kind of get away from things. And eventually these balls kind of became interconnected by a tube in the center and they were curvilinear in 3 ways. And no one in the residential sector knew how to build it, right? Because it's a 3-way curved thing. It looked like if you get a picture of an amoeba coming apart, right? Mm-hmm. And no one knew how to build it. We started in wood. It was like $1 billion, right? Because I figured ships are curved, so we could do that, right? It didn't work out so well.
Out of wood.
But because we had done so many schools through Ross Barney Architects, you know that playground equipment, most of it is unique. Like, you know, those blobs you see when you go out in the playground and like, those are all designed. Some of it's pieces that are put together, but a lot of it's just unique design. And what they do is they take high density foam and blow fiberglass into it. And so we ended up routing out with a big CNC machine, these huge pieces of high density foam, blowing fiberglass into them, and then coating it with like a limestone Venetian plaster. And so that project, right, like you couldn't put it together. Like if you just had a knowledge of wood, it would have gone away, you know? Yeah. And so, yeah.
So you guys figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about figuring it out, right?
It is.
If you want to do something new, you have to figure it out, right? If you have to prototype, you have to experiment. If you can't select it off the shelf, then you need to figure it out. A lot of architecture is that, though. You know, I don't think we're brilliant in any means. You know, every architect is doing things that are prototypical. You know, even if you're doing Walmarts and you get Walmart, each site is individual, right? So every building in some way is a prototype. So it's just kind of an expansion on that.
No, I would say, and I don't even know how many projects we've designed and built, and you know, we do all residential, mostly remodels and additions, and we've done a lot. No two are the same. It just doesn't exist, right? So there's areas where we want to try and find a level of prototype, and there's definitely repeatable things that we do over 12 years or 13 years now. But we did start a new term probably a year or so ago that we stole from Bruce Case in Washington, D.C., and that's production proven, because we're building it. So, and ultimately we want to get the folks their space. And if we design some sort of orb thing, that's fine, but we need to move it over into the not production proven category, right? So we can move on with the rest of the stuff.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, yeah, it's that one's hard because it really depends on the clients you have and what they expect and that kind of thing. You know, it's if you're going to be Sugar Bond, you need to have the budget and the capability of being able to explore those things, right? Like I talked with Tom Kundig, like he was at an event and he was talking about how, you know, his gizmologists, do you know what that is? Like he has people in his office that explore how to make those cranks and stuff they use in their architecture, right? And it does take a certain amount of, to be honest, budget and time to do those things, right? That not all of us are afforded. I mean, we're not even there, you know?
No, but I think, you know, the two of us are aligned. I think, like part of what LivCo does and why we're invented or founded was after my thesis, right? And my whole challenge was, especially like in the world of Chicago architecture, where, you know, no offense to, you know, Wheeler Kearns or Dirk Dennison or anything like that, But like there's 99.9999% of housing that exists in the Chicagoland, especially in the Chicago suburbs, it doesn't have access to any level, right?
Yeah.
So how do we find that happy medium where it's not inexpensive by any means to hire us to design and build a project, but we are able to get, good design relatively efficiently to more people is the idea. And I think,
I think technology is going to help us a lot. Are you guys looking into AI in your company?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think those tools, AI and some of the advances in modular construction and just construction and just industry in general, is moving in ways that is way different than even when the Industrial Revolution happened. And I hope, the optimist in me hopes that allows people, just everyone, to have, good design.
Yeah, that's the dream. And I think, and we might have talked about this before, but while I have this dream of wanting to, Usonian house the world, right? Or Lustron or however, like everybody gets good design. Trying to run a business that's a service business at the same time certainly presents challenges in that. So, I think what we've learned over the years is if we start with the Model 3, using a Tesla metaphor, right? If we start with the Model 3, it's harder to get to the Model S. But if we start with the Model S or the Roadster, which is going to have to be a higher end clientele that is going to allow us to test and build really special stuff to really understand what works and start to build out those prototypes, then eventually, and especially when the tools are there with AI and all the other technology, maybe there is something that's a little bit more repeatable, right, from a manufacturing and labor perspective is the dream. But on that same note, and you might have insights on this as well, just kind of understanding the Denver or the Boulder market and the Chicago market, and you guys are service architecture. So someone is hiring you to do feasibility studies, develop the design concepts, do all the construction documents, do all the interior design, construction administration, that whole deal, right?
Yep.
So that as a design, build, addition, remodeling company, we get to a certain level of clientele and they're going to go to full service architecture, right? Just because that is that premium product, right? Mm-hmm. So we kind of find ourselves in this middle area that we're trying to figure out how to better navigate, right? Because it's a really big range of clientele, from people that just need a better kitchen and appreciate good design, but are literally, borrowing everything under the sun. Yeah. To people that, have lots of money and want to get it done efficiently, but it's hard to get, above that in our markets because they're going to turn to, a Wheeler Kearns or a Moment or a Tumu, which is perfectly fine, but we're trying to figure out, how can we offer those services as well? Or did we start, the Model S is definitely not a Bentley.
Right. Well, I there's not an answer to your question, not an easy one that we can discuss in the next.
I don't even know if it's a question.
But I do think I've worked for a breadth of clients, right, through my career. And I think it's the client, not their economic status. Mm-hmm. And so, if you find clients, like we've had great clients that don't have a ton of money and want to, redo their kitchen, and we've worked with them to find something affordable, but like it's still, there's innovation, right? They get these things that are, because we put a little thought into it in another way, right? Yeah. But it's really the client that's hard. And so what your business, because you said you're kind of in that middle, there's so many people there that the diversity in what the clientele is. There's someone who just wants, here's the Home and Garden magazine kitchen that I want, right? Like that's generally not our client, because we want to figure out who you are when you come to us. We're about, what do you want through life? Do you love the color green? Like, who cares if it's trendy or not? Like, it's a kitchen. Like, how long are you going to live here? We ask these questions, and then we get to what the client, like the essence of the client is, right? Hopefully. And so I think that if you have clients that are adventurous, then eventually it, like the ice cream shop was not a large budget project by any means. Like we were on a shoestring, and we made it work. So I think it's really just the way you approach that, and then you find the clients in the strata of from wanting a kitchen to a custom home.
Yeah, it's about what they value, right?
Yeah.
Dude, we went a little long, but as we were saying, we could talk all day, or I could talk to you all day. That's for sure. But anything else you want to say, or we should cover in the last?
I will say, we talked about AI. AI is going to change our world in architects. I think it's gonna take a lot of work to figure out how to live with it. But I will say, like, if we're talking to small practitioners, it's really important to keep up with what AI is doing on our side, because I think it's gonna try to eat us first. Because the big companies like Zaha, I went to a lecture, they're building their own, right? They've got the funds, they've got the power, the staff to do it, the engine. But at our size, if we don't keep up with innovations, it's going to be the same thing as when you went to someone who wasn't using BIM. It's like, oh, you're drafting, like you just can't put
stuff like times 1,000 and way faster.
Yeah, and your fee is not competitive, and you're not able to show clients stuff in 3D. Like that just doesn't work anymore, really, right? It's going to be the same in AI, and if we don't keep up with it as small practitioners, it's going to be better if we use it and face it head on. Then you won't be able to ignore it.
Any really cool AI tools that you've been messing around with or trying?
I mean, we use chat for like proposals, for correcting emails, like your cadence and things like that. I'll go back to this podcast and look at it, and I'll be like, God, I said like so many times, or whatever it is, right? Chat GPT allows us to kind of get rid of that, the repetition and refinement, a little bit of our language, and quicker, right? There's some programs like in Studio, I use a program called Viscom. There's not a lot in architecture quite yet. There's companies that plug into BIM, things like that are easy enough to do. But finding things that, like, I don't know if you use Photoshop lately and you're doing a rendering and it's like, replace my sky with blue and clouds, and it puts like a high rise in the background, and like, like it's got a pterodactyl, and like, it's hard to get to like the specificity of architecture. And so this Viscom one, you can build your own kind of mind in the back of it, and then it can do like precedent for you, which is really good. It can animate your renderings. So like if you have a still image, you can say, make a woman walking through this kitchen and put down a bottle, and she'll do it, like, and it animates it really easily. So I think those are where those tools start. It's really good.
Yeah, I really, especially as a business owner, and as most firms are small businesses, right? Like the business tool capabilities are unreal. Like load 5 years of P&Ls in and be like, what I need to do, or what are you seeing that I'm not seeing, right? There's a million you can do there. So I have
research is really, really good too.
A lot of fun with that, or kind of understanding marketing positions. I did just have a conversation because I was at a conference last week and we had an AI speaker, and I said, what I'm learning is that ChatGPT, as I've been using it, is way too agreeable. I mean, I was going to ask it, like, should I run for president? And it'd be like, yeah, run for president. This is a great idea.
We had a 10-step program.
That's like, so, and he's like, that's been brought up, and they've actually tried to tweak that a little bit, but it's like, just tell it not to be so agreeable, to challenge you a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not.
But if you tell it to be critical, it will.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it'll write, one email one way. I'm like, are you sure we should do it like that? And I'm like, oh no, you're right. Maybe we shouldn't do it like that.
Right. It agrees with you then.
Right. So, and 5 is just out now, so I'm kind of intrigued to see any differences there. But yeah, in running and learning more about a business, I think it's been really, really cool. Just you can load in 2 sets of drawings, and I know you can do this stuff in Bluebeam too, but right, like, show me the discrepancies. Those tools are just gonna, in terms of drawing analysis, are just gonna happen even more. So, whether or not it's generating drawings for us, I don't see us getting away from blueprints, 2D blueprints anytime soon. But
yeah, I don't know. Contractors are getting more sophisticated.
It's
BIM
the
models are
modalities.
more and more complex.
Yeah.
And, if as AI starts to learn how to do those things, I don't know, the big thing about AI is it's going to take everyone's jobs, right? Like everyone thinks, like, if you're a writer, it's taking your job. If you're a graphic designer, it's taking your job. If you're an architect, it's taking your job. I mean, if our jobs go back to us being artists and just like living with our humanity, is that so bad?
I don't know, as long as I have health care.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Healthcare and an income, right?
Yeah. That would be nice.
Right. If you didn't have to draft anymore and you could just conceptualize architecture and find out where that skylight needs to go in order to inspire people when they walk through a hallway.
Yeah, no, I mean, going back to the COVID silver linings, I mean, there was a moment where I was staying with my family in my front yard. I'm like, yeah, I think we could just live in our minivan for the rest of our lives and be happy.
Right.
Like, when push comes to shove, sure.
That's
But
right.
yeah, Ross, this is awesome, man. I know we went a little long.
Thank you for having me, Dave. Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time. We'll have to do this again. I'm thinking after this one, we're just going to have to do a giant Getch reunion call. We'll get Amanda and Zachary, Jason Kane.
Right. I like Jason Kane. Wow. Yeah. I haven't talked to that guy in forever.
Yeah, I know. We should just do a live show reunion.
That might be too hilarious. Yeah.
All right, man.
All right,
if anyone needs to find you, Tumu Studio, is it tumustudio.com?
Yep. Or Tumu.studio.
Tumu.studio. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, keep up the awesome work. You guys are incredible. Always love chatting with you. And thanks again.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, Dave.
Bye.
Bye.